And I'm going to start, you guys probably, many of you probably know these guys better than I do, but I'm going to ask them to start by just describing their operations, what kind of crops grow, approximate scale, and I guess tillage panels, your tillage practices, anything relevant about fertility, that kind of thing.
Andy Novak, most of you might know me or see me. Dad, farm roughly 200 acres, corn, soybeans primarily. Typically just strip till the corn, no till beans primarily. Couple crops. First mix. Last year arrived.
Andrew Schick, I farm with my dad, Dale, around between Sleepless and Wadena. Grow corn, soybeans, black beans, a little bit of small grains when it's needed in rotation. And we just started transitioning into strip tilling a couple of years ago. This will be year 3. So we don't have quite the capacity yet to transition everything, but we're going to be about 2,000 acres of strip till this coming week.
So just to follow up on that, can you talk about the transition and sort of how your logistics in a strip till system are something different than your logistics did prior?
Well, it's a new piece of equipment. I don't think we would have done it without getting equipment that was capable of applying the fertilizer with the strip till operation. So that saves a pass, well, ideally saves a pass. Or you, if you're applying your fertilizer, we do make strips in the spring, just because we don't have the labor in the fall to get it done, with harvest going on, and freeze up always on your doorstep. So every operation is going to look different though. I don't think there's a lot of guys. I think it's much more common to make fall strips. And I don't know necessarily all the rationale behind that, but for us, we just figured we'd do it in the spring. Ideally, 6 to 24 hours. We have a planter right behind it. So logistically, it's a tillage pass. You're going to have a tillage pass before you plant anyway, so that hasn't changed much. The difference is, probably the biggest difference is for weed control. We have opted to put a burn down pre-emerge on every acre of strip till right after planting, or basically right post plant. So within a couple days of strip tilling, there's a spring burn down. And then also, unfortunately, you've got to do something to control some of the winter annuals in the fall that you won't get killed in the spring, or even with your post-emerge passes, you might have to do a burn down in the fall because that's some of the time some of those weeds are susceptible to getting killed. So that'd be the main thing with logistics. We don't put down. We're still putting down liquid starter with the planter, and so we're not even attempting. It's going to be totally different in other geographics, but where they're putting down a lot of nitrogen with their strip till rig. We're not really trying to put any nitrogen down in the strip. We're just mostly P and K, and actually probably 80-90% of that's just potash, or like a micronutrient, or down with a little elemental sulfur or something. The machine we have is pretty versatile, gives us a lot of options. But yeah, it hasn't been. The bottom line is, I guess, we're not putting down a huge amount of gross product, about 400 pounds an acre or anything. I've heard guys that have went away from strip till because they're always having to refill that thing, and they'd rather just have the block come out and spread their, all their nitrogen needs pre-plant than have to be refilling their strip till rig all the time with fertilizer. But for us, it's just a couple deliveries from Leaf River to the potash. It really isn't. That isn't tend to be a hang up.
So I guess I have a lot of similarities to Andrew. I didn't know, I guess when I started strip till, it was kind of early when I started taking over the farm from my dad, for that particular farm, so I just didn't have the tillage equipment. So it was just kind of a decision on, hey, which way do we want to go with this? And asked a few questions of why do we do full wet tillage, and just going to find enough justification for that. So, well, if I got to get a piece of equipment, I'll just get this piece instead. And so I've just kind of gone down that now. Commission everything myself, so logistics is the same. I do it. So,
What about timing of different things? You're not putting fall fertilizer on with your strips, or what are you doing that?
same as Andrew. I guess my first strip till rig, they just didn't have the capability to go in the fall. The ground was too harsh, and it just didn't have enough pressure for that. I now have a non-pluribus unit, and that's all this. That would be probably capable of coming fall, but I guess I haven't tried that as of yet. So everything I do is in the spring strips. So I kind of wait as long as possible until things are fit, and then I make my strips. Usually I can get everything done very quickly and come back. As soon as the strip rays off, I can go in there with planter. So long as it's not sticking to gauge wheels, but usually it's pretty quick.
Are you in that 1 to 2 day window like Andrew?
Yes.
So I think a lot of the reason that people do fall strips is partly for that fall fertilizer pass, but also so that they get the warm up of having black strips as soon as the snow melts. What do you guys notice with the spring warm up period on your ground and as your plants are emerging?
It's been pretty easy for me. I guess there's different logic behind that spring warm up. It's like my logic always has been, your warm up is when you get rid of the moisture. So as soon as you get a rainfall, well, everyone's going to get any. So if I can warm that strip up, dry it out just a little bit, I can get in there. It works very well.
Yeah, I can see where you get the benefit of with ball strips and heaviers with our CECs being like 5 to 10. We get cold really fast and we get warm really fast too. I only have the last 2 years to go off of, and we've been really dry. Literally no planting delays because of moisture. So the last spring, for instance, started out really cold. I can't say that I've seen any real appreciable difference because some areas are still, you mentioned till that there's been a lot of difference with emergence or anything like that. 2 years ago we had that frost freeze from Memorial Day, and so the extra corn residue that was a detriment to the strip till acres. The only place we had to replant was on strip till. It just seemed to be like that wasn't an appreciable difference as the ground didn't hold quite as much heat to get through those couple of cold nights.
I'm going to keep asking questions, but feel free to either raise your hands or type one in your chat, in your little text box, and it'll pop up there for everyone to see anonymously. But I'm a soil scientist. I didn't even ask you what soil types you're farming. It sounds like lighter ground. Is that what it is?
Yeah, sandy loam, sand.
Good grass.
Good grass. Oh, good. That's going to fit. Okay. I guess I wanted to come back to you, Andy, and ask you. So you said you made the transition essentially when you had to buy new equipment. Like maybe you might not have made the transition if you weren't going to buy new equipment anyway. Is that kind of how you're describing that?
I think it probably would have happened eventually anyhow. They just asked the question of why do we do full village?
Yeah.
And I couldn't justify it. Plant's pretty small, and everyone sees a small little area in the world. It's still, so why till the whole field? benefits of the no-till, which I think are pretty significant. There's a lot of reasons for that, but kind of split the difference. It's half-tilled and half-tilled. So.
And you said you're doing some cover crops in your system. How does that, which parts of the rotation do you do cover crops in? And you said you've got a few different species mixes?
Correct, yes. So I end up relying on cereal rye quite a bit, maybe more than I want. But just to get enough biomass, that kind of works because it overwinters. Some other things can work. But I guess my best success is growing corn. If I have a good stand of cereal rye, come next spring, plant the soybeans into a no-till, that works quite well. And I don't get too big of a hurry on trimming cereal rye. I think there's a lot of benefits there. Get some growth and different things like that. That's probably when I get the most biomass from my other crop.
After corn, before beans.
Correct.
And then I'm curious with you, Andrew, you said you're still running a lot of conventional ground. So you essentially got two different farming systems running parallel right now. Is that, do you like having that? Who wants to want two jobs? But is that your plan long term? Do you want that flexibility, or do you want to just go one direction?
I've got a lot of optimism that moving forward there'll be a day where I'll be strip till. We're just kind of trying to stay a little diversified at my best, so we have a little more data. There's still a little bit, so to speak. Because it's an entirely different mindset. You don't get rid of too many headaches, you just get new ones. There's plenty of new challenges that you'll find, but what I was really after when we started making the switch and just bit the bullet was that I could apply the majority of our fertilizer right in the root zone and not make the plant go and find it and have it broadcasted and then have the variable rate functionality right there with it. And then, I don't think I'm unlike the rest of you that it just makes me physically sick when I see my fields blowing like, when was it? We had a couple stretches, 3-4 days this past spring, late May, early June, and there was a lot of dirt moving. And I had fields when I conventionally tilled field of black beans on one side of the road that was getting sandblasted really bad, really looked ugly. On the other side of the road were soybeans that were strip tilled, and there was hardly anything moving. And 30-40 mile an hour wind for a couple days. So it's hard to quantify a lot of things, but you don't have to have too deep of a thought process to see that there's some benefit there. And then labor-wise too, when you start getting into some really high-yielding corn, all that residue is a real challenge, and making multiple tillage passes of just thinking about all that fuel and all that labor and all that equipment where we've been through a lot of different discs over the years that are it's hard to find anything that did a real great job in the first place, and as expensive as they are. And just with some roll cleaners and the strip till rig, that's one thing I do have to say. It makes a pretty nice split. If you just pay attention to the conditions a little bit, I've been happy with that.
What crops do you plant into your strips?
Corn, soybeans, and black beans.
Got a question from the group about what's been your biggest challenge?
Hey, think about it.
I would think that one would stick out in your mind. What do you want to forget?
I guess in my first couple of years, getting residue from combine corn stalks, trying to strip till through corn stalks, there were some major plugging issues. So you learn things with the combine they have to do the fall before. It makes life so much easier next year. You can really shoot yourself in the foot by not managing those corn stalks.
Yeah, describe your combine.
So there was a little bit of a combine switch at one point, but chopping corn stalks, in my opinion, that's going to be a disaster. Trying to get through that. So I run calmer corn stalks. So typically I try and manage that corn stalk. I try and cut it as high as possible, leave as much standing at food as possible. Then I don't have to deal with it the next spring. And those chopping corn stalks, or chopping snapping rolls. Place the residue right next to the row. They're not in between the rows, so I don't have to push them out of the way at all possible the next year. Chopping corn stalks, you make an even mat, and you just got to be able to get it.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that approach because we've got a chopping head and it makes things pretty fluffy. But then we added the other stock devastators under the corn head, and we were really happy with the job they did. They sped up the breakdown of the stocks. Nice job of crimping up. It could have been the nice. It could have been the nice hot fall we had 2 years ago. I'm sure that helped a lot too. But yeah, that residue management is, it's huge. But we put those stock devastators on. I think that was a must. And then first year we didn't have road cleaners on there's road cleaners on the strip till rig, so that moves a lot of trash, but then it can always blow back in. So we added some on the planter. It really wasn't an issue. So especially soybeans, they're pretty forgiving when it comes to getting a stand. Maybe lowering your ceiling a little bit. You don't have the greatest stand, but you're going to have a disaster by any means. As far as the biggest challenge, I'm quite picky about certain things, and getting a good corn stand is one of them. And singulating and spacing and everything. And so we sprung for implement guidance on the strip till rig and the planter and RTK and all those upgrades so that we can be right in the strip. But it's been much less than ideal trying to stay in the center of your strip while you're planting. That guidance just isn't as to be when you're making headlands. And if farming fields like we do, that nothing is a rectangle, you can have up to, most fields are 20, 30, up to 40% of your field is headlands. And I think we would cut down on that headache if our planter were matched, the size was matched with our strip till, because we're 24 rows on the planter and 12 on the strip till. So if we were 12 to 12 or 16 to 16, we'd do a better job. But on that guidance, the way the math works out, making curved lines, it's really hard to stay in the strip. I think we're getting better at it. We're going to try some different strategies moving forward, but that kept the blood pressure pretty high in the last few springs, trying to be right in the center.
I think it's really interesting. I mean, these guys have described kind of opposite management strategies for making that corn residue work in a strip till system, right? You're keeping big chunks and vertical, and you're getting as small chunks as you can and leaving it on the ground. So it's kind of interesting that you can make it work either way, just depending on your equipment and your system and everything else. And same thing with what you said about you don't have the labor to do a fall pass strip till. I feel like I've talked to guys in other parts of the state who don't have the labor in the spring when they're managing plantings. They like to get it done in the fall and have that out of the way so they don't have to think about it in the spring. So it tends to be a lot of variability in these systems, as in any farm systems, I guess. Just to look at the positive side of the coin, you talked about a situation that's really challenging with these, but what have you liked most about these strip till systems? And then I don't know how well the mic is working, so either use the mic really next to your mouth or project.
Again, it's really nice not watching dirt blow. That's a pretty obvious one. Even with some water erosion, you get these belly washers, 4 or 6 inch rings. We didn't get a lot of those the last couple of years, but I want to say this past spring we had, when was it? Whenever there was a big windstorm and there were a few tornadoes around Normandy as well. There was some rain that came about that wind, and one of the fields that we typically see a spot where we've been fixing always over the years, the same spot over and over. All that washed was down to the depth of the tillage was done, about 5 inches with the strip downhill and along the same orientation that the gully would typically cut. It only cut as deep as the strip till as the strip till wins. And in some places it wasn't quite that deep, and the sprout of the soybeans that were there was still holding on to a little bit of dirt. So that was encouraging.
Yeah, erosion is funny. Some years it's just real slow process of loss of some of your topsoil, and some years it's these scouring events that are really devastating all of a sudden.
Yeah, and I should say to contrast that with a conventionally tilled field where we had a ripper in after potatoes. Potatoes that had been rotated the year before. That ground got pretty pulverized. And some of it was operator error because you should have trained the operator not to have the hilling disc down as well when he was ripping, so he really had a fluffy seed bed. But in contrast, that was that field was pretty ugly after the same rain event.
I guess what I like about it is water infiltration. You know, it's not too often I see ponding water, but water issues is usually with snow melt. That's kind of my biggest issue now. Frozen ground, pretty tough to get it.
Frozen ground is frozen ground. Even no-till doesn't get you enough frozen ground in the middle of it. You guys both talked about your techniques using the strips to apply fertilizer. I don't know if AW said specifically, have you cut back on fertilizer relative to a conventional system, or are you at similar rates?
I guess, I'll be cutting back more. I guess I've just done crop removal. And so, yeah, I can probably pull back more than that. Usually I get pretty high cost, but just to clean myself off, I guess it's stayed pretty much at crop removal.
Yeah, with the main nutrient that we're putting down, potash, I talked to some people that said you really don't want to go over 100 pounds of potash because of the salt content, and you're concentrating it into the strip a little bit. We did some trials where we were up to 250 pounds of potash. We didn't see any crop injury, any stunting like that, but we're just going off university regs and removal basically, because for these first couple of years anyway, we've made a variable rate map based on the soil or grid testing. So these first few years, we tend to try to keep levels pretty good, and so the first few years, the variable rate maps came back such that there was quite a bit of savings because there were a lot of portions of fields that were requiring no potash. And I'd say where maybe typically we would put on a removal rate of maybe 100 pounds of potash. To start the program off with a grid sample that you're seeing all these spots require nothing, it brought the average of the field down more than 50 pounds. But in terms of cutting back overall, just because we're concentrating it, we haven't done that. Maybe we could dabble in it in the future, but for now, I just want to keep some of those barriers to
Yeah, it sounds like you're still trialing the two systems and want to probably not change everything at once. That's good science, everybody. If you're testing stuff in your field, try to test just one thing at a time. The other thing you brought up was different weed control and weed populations. Is that something you've seen too, Andy? Has your weed populations changed in the system with less tillage? And how so?
I guess guess, there is more winter animals, and that's just gonna happen. Yeah, they're kind of nice out there sometimes, but how much of a competition are they? And it's not as big as we want to say they are. I understand I'm still trying to control them, but we control's been pretty good. Not too bad. We always have issues like everyone, but I really like the cereal pie. That really makes a big difference in the spring. If I can have a cereal pie up there growing in, I really like that.
What's been a really good year for cover crops for you, and what's been a really poor year for cover crops for you? Was it about the weather, management, or the combination?
I guess it's hard to compare year to year. And it's hope for the best and we get. So
Good life philosophy. Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask you about cover crops specifically is some people talk about an increase in pests with like a green bridge from a cover crop. Have you seen anything like that, or not too much?
just a number of years ago, I had a slug issue. That came with the cereal rye. They fed on soybeans for a little while. Wasn't not an issue. It didn't do anything about it, but you just noticed that there were slugs out there. Armyworms, yeah, armyworms can be an issue too, but I haven't had anything in threshold or an issue, but I see more of them sometimes.
And it's wet years, I'm assuming, for those? Or?
Yeah, it's kind of like cold wet years, that sounds like.
Another question from the audience, are you seeing yield reduction or yield gain?
I don't think there's any yield reduction. It all depends on your plant, I guess, but it's been good for me.
I think that the intensive management has been maybe per hour. There's a reduction, just because it's been so intensive to get everything sorted out, working just the way we want to see it work. But as far as a yield drag goes, year one was that drought year. In 21, that I can't say. So I'm kind of going. I don't want to make a lot of judgments for at least 3 years because I think it's going to take some time. But like I'm looking forward to, like Andy mentioned, the water infiltration. If we keep a little more water in the hilltops and get rid of it a little faster in the holes, that's going to make a big difference, especially with something like apple beans. I mean, they don't like sitting in water. We lose a lot of acres of apple beans every year just because they sit in water an extra day after a big rain. So I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing some of those benefits. But I guess the first year, it felt like, as far as corn and soybeans were concerned, we didn't see the strip till. The ceiling was a little lower, and the floor was a little higher, so we saw more stability. But when I just took everything for an average, it wasn't a significant drag. I wouldn't say our worst fields were some conventionally tilled fields, and the best ones were conventionally tilled fields. Last year, I had a couple corn fields next to each other, for example, that were the same hybrid, half mile apart. One strip tilled and one conventionally tilled, and really no significant difference. They look the same year round. I'm not going to go so far as to say that's typical, because there's a lot of little things you can mess up that can turn that one or the other really easily. I think just making a good seed bed, having a good weed control program makes a huge difference. But yeah, you just deal with kind of different things. It seems like our weed control, that was part of the previous question. Weed control's been excellent. Without stirring up the soil, there is hardly anything that comes at times. I think we've had excellent activation from our pre-emerge herbicide program too, but there's one different one is there's a lot of mare still out there, but that's pretty easy to kill even with our weed control's been excellent. There's something else I wanted to to say about that. Yeah, then the winter annuals again. There's quite a few dandelions. I think it's mostly cosmetic, really. And I guess I don't care if I'm just thinking about my dandelions too much, as long as I don't get reported for something invasive. I don't know. Yeah, but they're harder to kill than you think without tillage.
Yeah, I like what you said about the sort of per hour cost of what you're doing and how the management is taking you a lot of time right now. Because, yield up and down is one thing, but inputs in up and down is the other aspect of profit, right? And so you're spending more time on it right now, but maybe the inputs will go down, certainly the diesel should go down. So maybe in the end it kind of comes out a wash. And then that stability point is kind of interesting too. And some research has blamed that on the water behavior, the changes that you get with a system with good structure. Because when you have a conventionally tilled system, you're kind of blowing up the soil structure and creating lots of little pores. And that's great for a plant to emerge usually. You want a little oxygen, a little water everywhere. But for water to move through the soil, you need, vertical big pores, and you break those up every time you run a bigger tillage path. So that's why the infiltration should come with these practices, more or less. There's a cover crop question in particular, I'm guessing for you, Andy. How are you seeding your cover crop for corn? Do you plot it on, and how does it do in late harvested corn?
I guess for my application rig, I have a John Deere 6000, which is a old hideous piece of equipment, but is low cost of entry for that, and I'll be able to do a lot of interesting things with that. And so typically Labor Day weekend, I'm able to go out there and standing corn and with the air system blow on my cereal rye or whatever I want to mix in that. And usually I get pretty good establishment out of that early September timeframe. Canopy starts breaking down 2 weeks after that, get a shot of rain, residue falls on it, comes through pretty good.
Yeah, that makes sense, where you've got a little time for it to emerge, usually get a rain, and then hopefully get a light in within a couple of weeks or so.
Right, and I have drilled it in earlier, like D6 corn. Had a skip row drill, go in there and drill. That was interesting. I could do a lot of other species because I had a lot longer growing season at that point. Cowpeas and lung beans and a lot of other legumes. Some of those petered out come the end of the season just because of lack of light, but it was still interesting. I got more biomass, but herbicide program hinders that to a certain degree.
Yeah, cereal rye, the one you mentioned, tends to be really robust to herbicide. Has that been your experience?
Exactly, yeah. Any residuals, you can say, having residuals that affect cereal rye. So that works quite well for me. It's pretty universal. It's like I do cereal rye after harvest on soybeans. That can be a little bit of a dicey situation going into corn again. But I think the strip till maybe buffers that a little bit for me, just because I have a little bit of a tillage break there. But no tilling in cereal rye corn might be riskier than I want. But I put some nitrogen on with my planter. I got some 28, let it drip over the top of the row. So I kind of buffers some side there, so this cereal rye as well.
Yeah, cereal rye can affect your crop in a whole bunch of ways, right? Just from the water it takes up if it's a dry year and the crop is competing too much. But then this nitrogen tie-up can be a really big thing where the cereal rye is decomposing and that's pulling nitrogen from the soil right when your corn crop wants it. So the starter nitrogen is really critical if you're going to follow cereal rye with corn, I'd say. Yeah, well, it's always hard to learn something new, but it's also exciting, right? You get to, stretch it. That's neat that you've got a good team behind you. Question about after heavy rain. So think back a couple of years now. We haven't been getting such heavy rains the last couple of years. Have you seen much for residue being washed into piles with the strip till?
I guess my issue is only in the springtime, the spring melt. If things pond and then it floats over to the edges, that's my biggest issue. One thing I think that might help with the standing corn as well is if I have that green growing cereal rye, it tends to anchor that down. It kind of makes a big web of mat and it kind of locks together so it doesn't pick up and float away either. So it helps break it down.
Yeah, I can't speak to it too much in terms of in-season rains, but I think everybody struggled this year. This spring we had a couple. I feel like April was awful last year. We couldn't get anything to melt, but it was either like the first couple days of April last year or the last few days of March. We had a ton of thawing going on, and then yeah, we had all these. But it wasn't at all specific to the strip till. It was on the conventional till as well, because where you'd get a bowl, maybe half the size of this room or something that was just a thick mat of corn residue, but that wasn't specific to the strip till. That was conventional till as well. But then I will have to say, the strip till rig was not able to get through that. Just like you might have to hit that with a disc 5 or 6 times to try to break up that thick mat of residue with thaw. So yeah, that reminds me, in some of those spots where soybeans were going, trying to get planted through that thick mat of corn residue, they didn't do so hot. Well, that was where that's a knock on the challenge side of things.
For me in those spots, I had 2 passes with row cleaners to push that out of the way. So I had the first pass with strip till rig. If I had, say, that load of corn residue that piled up, strip till rig, I could open it up part way and then come through the planter. I could turn the down pressure up, row cleaners there, and I could kick it out of the way again. So I made a burn, but we could roll through it.
Yeah, we had the row cleaners as well. Mine, I was going to have to get out and adjust all 24 just for that 100 feet or whatever. And no.
Not worth it.
My recommendation is, I gotta tell my dad that floating row cleaners and all that, we gotta go. That's me. Because a situation like that, you don't adjust it if you have to manually do it. So that'd be my recommendation, is floating row cleaners.
Who have you guys talked to as you sort of learned these new systems? Have you talked to people in the area? Are you on social media groups like for strip till, or how are you learning new things to do?
I guess I started out at West Intermedia, no-till farmer. Went to a couple conferences there, got started there, but otherwise locally, there wasn't much. So Twitter was big back when I was doing it early. So I followed a lot of people on Twitter back in the day.
Yeah, that's probably the only reason I joined Twitter, was to just try to see what other people were doing. And then, yeah, anybody I could grab onto that had any kind of experience, because it was so new around here. There were a couple guys in Ottertail County that I talked to that were, the challenge was finding people in similar situations that were on, poor sandy soil, wanted to make spring strips, irrigated, we're gonna have the same guidance issues, equipment issues. Finding people that were in similar situations, similar operations was kind of the difficult part. But I sought out anybody I could pin down for 5 minutes to pick their brain.
Yeah, are you gonna, if you expand, are you gonna stick with the system you have, or is there stuff you add or change now? Are you convinced by this floating row cleaner argument?
Yeah, it's just another thing that isn't free is all.
Yeah.
That was tough is adding the options we did add, because everything you add to it kind of cuts off another appendage.
Yeah.
This stuff is just astronomically priced.
Did you think about leasing anything, or did that not feel like an option for you?
The trouble, they did have an option. I've got a solar warrior. They did have an option where if you leased it and then you chose to purchase it, that they reduced, basically per acre, they reduced the price of the machine and gave you a credit for what the first year of use was.
Yeah.
But yeah, there just were, I tried to, there were a few farmers, no one real close or anything, but maybe 50 miles away that I had tried to kind of twist their arm to either let me do some custom work or rent it from me in the fall, because they were also, one guy's from Fergus, one guy kind of north of Perham that I talked to. They both wanted to do strip till as well, but they're like me, trying to get over the hurdle cost and the whole paradigm shift. And I thought, well, if you want to use it in the fall, I can use it in the spring. It isn't gonna, we're not gonna either be out anything. And I just couldn't quite make any and bring them along beside me. But I think we do have the option. We could add a few rows on to the wings, and we may look into that. Well, we are looking into it in the future, just to add some more capacity. It could be a little tough as well, because we can do more acres with the planter and the strip till rig. It's not a huge bottleneck, but that's one thing that still having conventional acres is allowed us to do. Is there's usually a field, have one guy doing conventional tillage, one guy doing a strip till, and if we've had an issue with the strip till or it's not far enough ahead, I can still plant somewhere. But no, I think we would stick with what we've got. All the research I did, everyone pointed me towards Soil Warrior. If you're in a situation with 200 plus bushel corn residue, they said the Soil Warrior is going to handle that much residue a lot better than anything else they'd seen. And they had the longest track record in the industry, really. And I didn't really want to dip my toe in and get burned. I would kind of like to do things.
Yeah, so
give it a good swing.
now that you guys both have a couple years of experience in these sandy soils, what would you say is different from what you were seeing on Twitter that people were doing in finer textured soils with these practices? Not that much?
Go out there and do it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's what you have to do everywhere. Go out there and do it.
Pretty much.
Yeah, Twitter is just kind of a bank of people's experiences. Yeah. Again, it was hard to find ones. There was a guy I was following from East Central Minnesota who would be probably the main difference there is he's dry land, and so I bounced some things off of him. But he probably had the most. He's probably the only one really that had similar soil types, other than a couple guys I talked to. Otter Taylor County. Yeah, this is not an endorsement of Twitter. I recommend leaving it for as much as you can.
Twitter circa 10, 15 years ago, it sounds like, even 5.
Yeah, 5.
So there's a question up there that just says soil health ? Which I'm thinking means, have you noticed any changes in your soil with these practices? Just, I don't know how it looks in the field, how it responds to a rain. Have you done any soil testing for organic matter or nutrients?
I am maintaining more residue on the surface. It has its benefits as well for water infiltration, erosion, all that. The biggest visual indicator, you walk out there after rain or at night, and there is a lot of worms. And even if you just walk down the corn rows during the summer, the amount of worm middens, the piles, they're doing my tillage for me between the row. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, I think I would echo that. I was really surprised, even after 1 year last year. I went out with the first field we strip tilled, probably like May 4th or something. It had been black bean ground, we were strip tilling for corn. And just about every handful I put in the ground had worms, had a worm. And you used to have to look pretty hard for those, from what I remember. Or I didn't look very much because I didn't see very many. So I don't want to weight that too heavily, get ahead of myself too much there, but I was surprised by it after 1 year. So that's, I think it's encouraging. The jury's out a little bit. And then the other thing that this year I noticed, we struggle with compaction on headlands. And we had a lot of compaction on headlands just because you're driving, you're bringing, we haul off the field with straight trucks mainly, and they come on the field. You try not to park at the same place, but your grain cart's coming up to the same spot, and your trucks are going to the same spot. So there's quite a bit of compaction out there. And so we had a fair amount of that going in spots going into the strip till practice. And I thought, and we still deal with some of those spots. You can tell there's compaction out there, but there's other spots this fall. I made a concerted effort to go to some spots that we had there'd been heavy traffic on during harvest, and just stick a probe down and look for compaction. And I was pleasantly surprised there was none. After 2 years of strip till on some of these high traffic areas, I can't really explain it other than that I think that there's roots down a foot or two below that strip that they stay intact, and they just they have a, it's not a honeycomb structure, but that structure is that is left there has strength to it, where you pulverize things and they pack in pretty tight. So I'm encouraged by that as well.
Yeah, that's a good one, that compaction piece, and what you're talking about in terms of the structure. It's like you have all these this mishmash of soil particles, and in between it there's space, and as you till, you add more space, but then as it rains and it settles, the space is gone. Whereas if you're not tilling, you're letting the space that naturally forms around roots and here and there, that space just stays. So the first thing is just not destroying the blocks, the building blocks that you have, and letting that space stay. I think that's what you're kind of seeing. The other thing I'll say is, so these guys both talked about, kind of stuff that they're seeing in the field. And I do lab tests for soil health, but I always encourage people to look at their fields, especially after a rain. I have a friend down in SWCD in southern Minnesota, and he says the best way to assess soil health is to go out while it's raining and watch how much it's sinking in. But I think after is fine too. You don't have good enough rain here or whatever. And watch that infiltration, because that gives you a lot of indication of structure, and you don't really get structure unless you've got organic matter and biology holding things together. So it all fits together.
Yeah, that reminds me, I'm always trying to look for ways to quantify things, because so much of this stuff is kind of qualitative and really hard to measure and get a quantity of change. And so we've got a couple fields that we're going to transition into strip till for the first time this year, and I want to get a baseline, take a couple of different soil health tests, take a Haney test, and see what else is out there, just for a baseline, and start logging, see what kind of change, if any, we're going to see soil health wise.
Yeah, that Haney test is good. It has a bunch of different microbial biological indicators, and then there's some that cover the structure piece a little bit more. There's one at Cornell and one at University of Missouri that have a little physical and a little biological to them. But yeah, soil health tests tend to change really slowly and to be really bouncy, because you're really looking at what microbes are up to with a lot of those organic matter pools. That changes from day to day and hour to hour. So you just get a lot of inherent variability trying to track that. So going out at the same time of year, same conditions, same spot is going to be really critical to being able to actually see differences in that kind of property. We got a straight up question here. Are you shifting your line every year or planting in the same strips year to year? I don't remember if you said that.
I shift half the space. There might be time where I split that difference, but right now, 30-inch rows, I shift 15. That's what I currently do.
Yeah, we'll shift them. Try not to be right over the top. I've heard people on Twitter say they like to be right as close to, on dry land situations where you might have more more nutrients that are left unavailable because of not enough moisture. They like to kind of piggyback off of last year's. They've said that they can see a difference when they're right next to last year's strip because they're kind of scavenging last year's starter fertilizer even after these drought years. But yeah, somewhere between 10 and 15 inches on 30 rows. Our strips 6 to 10 inches wide, and I just assume rotate it every 3 years or something, not go 15 back and forth. I don't think it really matters a whole lot, but I just assume be over 8-10 inches and scavenge a little bit possibly. But I can't even figure out how to be in the center. I haven't figured out being in the center 100% of the time yet, so I'm going to focus on that.
Yeah, that's a pretty high level of precision, getting every area tilled every 3rd year.
You can, but when I move over 15, it's like, well, your old row is your marker. No, you just center it up. It makes it easy. Another thing that would decide that is how you can get your planter to ride next to that old row. Getting the planter row unit to ride next to that corn stalk, if you get too close and you start riding on that stalk, just the consequences are too high for me. So I just stay away from it. But there is benefit if you can be next to that old row. If I could slice it right next to it, I would, but getting the row unit to ride the way it should is challenging.
So it's not worth your time and anxiety to get it perfect relative
Yeah,
to getting it pretty good.
I'd say that's kind of low on the totem pole. Because so we went to RTK, but coming off of SF2, you're not going to be able to stay right between all the time because they're not the same. They're not the same strength of accuracy. So again, I think there were spots where we did cross over, and I don't know, and I think it wasn't it was less than ideal, but things came out of it okay. There were a lot of things that first year you weren't really going to come back and fight you hard. There were a lot of nibbles, things that nibbled at you, but we didn't have any. Yeah, we didn't have anything that ended up being catastrophic.
Any other questions from the audience? I'm curious, have both of you worked with programs to cost share some of these practices, especially as you've gotten started, or did you do things outside of what they were prescribing? Or?
Yeah, that was, it would never have been feasible to pull the trigger without getting set up with EQIP or CSP to help cost share the nutrient management end of things. Is actually that capability was a greater help than anything else, probably being able to do the variable rate. Yeah, I couldn't have seen biting the bullet, so to speak, I guess, after 2020, when markets did. It was, going into winter of 2020, even though the markets were starting to rally, that wouldn't have been your typical time to make such a big shift in things. But I had everything ready, and I felt like we did the research, and it was kind of now or never thing, because I'm not getting any younger, and I knew that it was going to take time, so I wanted to get started. And beyond that, in terms of you do have to really pay attention when you do partake in those programs to cross your T's and dot your I's. You have to have control of the land, and we strip till 2,000 acres, but we don't own 2,000 acres, and so they try to explain what you're doing to all your landlords and get a longer lease, and that was all a lot of labor of love as well.
I guess I have a fairly similar story to Andrew, but pretty much.
Yeah, you use the cost share programs.
I did, yeah. Mine was a few years earlier, but same situation.
Yeah, I think it's a great strategy for that risk mitigation. It's not maybe going to fund the whole practice, especially with cover crops. It's not maybe going to fund it for every year for a long period, but it's a little cushion. Was there anything else you guys would want to talk about that I missed asking you? What are you excited to try this year? Let's just say that. What are your goals for this year?
I guess, the fertility is going to be a little bit different for me. I've got the new strip till rig, the Pluribus. This is my second season, but first year with fertilizer on it. So that'll be my biggest problem.
Like I said, as far as strip till goes, I guess we got the capability of putting down multiple products, and so like I said, we're going to try a few other fertility measures, like maybe some elemental sulfur, and other than that, we're just going to. I think I mentioned too, we're just trying another strategy to try to stay in right in the center of the strip on the headlines better. Get another 1 or 2 or 3% better farm stand.
Yeah, that's a good goal. All right, if there are any other questions, otherwise we can maybe give these guys a hand. Thank you so much for talking so much about the details.